In the middle of the 16th century, Japan was not a unified nation, but a fracturing, self-consuming realm. The Sengoku Jidai, known as the era of warring states, had already bled the islands dry for nearly 100 years. The emperor in Kyoto lived in gilded isolation, holding absolute spiritual authority but possessing virtually no political force. The Ashikaga shogunate, which had once maintained a delicate equilibrium across the provinces, had collapsed into a hollow institution, completely incapable of enforcing peace. Across the mountainous countryside, real power belonged solely to the daimyo, regional military warlords who fought endless, brutal wars of attrition. Alliances were sealed through forced marriages and hostage exchanges, only to be shattered by treason the moment a neighbor showed a structural weakness. Entire dynasties rose and vanished in the span of a single generation. Yet this brutal crucible of betrayal and conflict produced the most radical visionary in Japanese history. His name was Oda Nobunaga. He was the first of Japan's three legendary unifiers, preceded by no one who shared his terrifying clarity of purpose, and followed by his former retainers Toyotomi Hideyoshi and Tokugawa Ieyasu. Nobunaga was far more than an exceptionally gifted tactician or an ambitious provincial lord. He was a ruthless innovator who recognized that the old medieval order could not be reformed, it had to be systematically torn down. He shattered centuries-old feudal traditions, crushed the terrifying military hegemony of Buddhist monastic empires, and was the very first warlord in Asia to understand how firearm technology could revolutionize the theater of war. Born in 1534 in Owari province, a region corresponding to modern-day Aichi prefecture, Nobunaga was the son of Oda Nobunaga. His father was a capable, aggressive regional commander, but by no means one of the supreme powers of Japan. In his youth, the young Nobunaga gave every indication that he would bring ruin to his lineage. The samurai aristocracy of Owari viewed his behavior with utter horror. He openly despised formal etiquette and traditional attire, wandering through the castle town dressed in bizarre, brightly colored robes with unkempt hair and bare shoulders. He spent his days in the company of common street urchins, practicing archery, swimming in turbulent rivers, and obsessing over the primitive firearms brought to Japan by European traders. The retainers of the Oda clan privately referred to him as Owari no Owakamono, the Great Fool of Owari. Most political observers assumed that upon his father's death, the Oda clan would be swiftly devoured by aggressive neighboring clans, as their young heir appeared completely unhinged. The situation grew so desperate that his senior tutor and guardian, Hirate Masahide, committed ritual suicide, known as seppuku, in a desperate attempt to shame the young lord into accepting his duties. The scandal reached its absolute peak during his father's funeral ceremony. While the gathered nobility observed solemn Buddhist rites, Nobunaga strode up to the altar in rough, inappropriate clothing, scooped up a handful of ceremonial incense, and threw it directly at the ancestral tablet before walking out without a word. What his critics failed to realize was that this public eccentricity masked a cold, calculating intellect. Nobunaga did not reject traditions out of juvenile spite. He rejected them because he viewed the rigid etiquette of the medieval elite as obsolete and useless for survival in a broken world. When his father died in 1551, the 18-year-old heir was immediately forced to defend his birthright. A brutal war of succession broke out within his own family, backed by rebellious vassals who favored his younger brother. Through a series of lightning strikes, psychological warfare, and uncompromising violence, Nobunaga crushed internal opposition, executed those who betrayed him, and consolidated absolute control over Owari province by the late 1550s. The moment that transformed Nobunaga from a regional warlord into a national phenomenon occurred in the summer of 1560 at the Battle of Okehazama. Imagawa Yoshimoto, one of the most powerful and prestige-obsessed daimyo in the realm, assembled an overwhelming invasion force numbering between 25,000 and 40,000 warriors. His army began a triumphant march toward Kyoto, and the small province of Owari stood directly in his path. Nobunaga could mobilize barely 3,000 men. According to every established rule of classical Japanese warfare, open resistance meant absolute annihilation. Nobunaga's senior counselors begged him to surrender or to lock his forces behind castle walls to negotiate terms. Nobunaga listened to their pleas in total silence, ordered a feast, performed a short, famous dance from the No Theater about the brevity of human existence, and then mounted his horse. He had spent years building a sophisticated intelligence network of spies and scouts, and they brought him critical news. The massive Imagawa army had halted its march to celebrate their early victories in a narrow, wooded ravine known as Okehazama. Relaxed, drunk on sake, and overconfident, the Imagawa troops had lowered their guard. Nobunaga executed a masterclass in asymmetrical warfare. First, he dispatched a small detachment of troops to a nearby temple, raising dozens of battle flags to trick Imagawa scouts into believing his main force was preparing a desperate defensive stand. Meanwhile, under the cover of a torrential summer thunderstorm that obscured vision and muffled sound, Nobunaga led his primary strike force through the mountain trails around the enemy flank. When the storm suddenly broke, the Oda forces launched a terrifying surprise attack directly into the heart of the Imagawa encampment. Panic swept through the valley. The Imagawa vanguard had no time to form defensive lines or draw their weapons. Imagawa Yoshimoto himself was caught off guard in his personal pavilion and decapitated before he could grasp the scale of the disaster. His vast army dissolved into chaos and fled in every direction. In a single afternoon, an obscure warlord from an unassuming province had decapitated one of the grandest coalitions in Japan. The victory at Okehazama sent shockwaves across the islands, establishing Nobunaga's reputation as a military commander who would gladly risk total annihilation for a chance at decisive victory. Following Okehazama, Nobunaga secured his eastern flank by forging a permanent military alliance with a rising young commander named Matsudaira Motoyasu, who would later take the name Tokugawa Ieyasu. With his rear protected, Nobunaga turned his attention northward toward Mino province. After a grueling campaign of siegecraft and political subversion, he captured the enemy's main stronghold, renamed it Gifu Castle, and unveiled the foundational philosophy of his remaining life. He adopted a personal state seal engraved with the phrase Tenka Fubu, which translates as, cover all under heaven with military force, or, unify the realm by the sword. This was no longer a campaign for local self-defense or regional expansion. It was an explicit declaration of war against the fragmented state of Japan itself. Nobunaga was publicly announcing his intention to subjugate every province under a single centralized authority. Opportunity knocked on a grand scale in 1568. Ashikaga Yoshiaki, the brother of a murdered shogun, fled to Nobunaga begging for military assistance to claim his rightful title in Kyoto. Nobunaga recognized the immense legitimacy this offered his campaign. He marched his disciplined army directly into the imperial capital, meeting virtually no resistance, and installed Yoshiaki on the shogunal throne. However, Yoshiaki quickly realized that he was nothing more than a political figurehead. When the new shogun attempted to organize a secret coalition of rival daimyo to assassinate his benefactor, Nobunaga marched back into Kyoto in 1573, stripped Yoshiaki of his authority, and banished him from the city. With that single act, the 200-year-old Ashikaga shogunate was permanently extinguished. Nobunaga's ascent was not merely driven by strategic brilliance, it was fueled by a radical revolution in military technology and logistics. Until his era, samurai warfare was dominated by mounted archers, noble swordsmen, and loosely organized peasant infantry wielding spears. In 1543, Portuguese traders washed ashore on the island of Tanegashima, introducing matchlock arquebus to Japan. Most conservative daimyo viewed these primitive firearms with deep skepticism. They were slow to reload, useless in rainy weather, and lacked the noble tradition of the bow and blade. Nobunaga saw past these limitations immediately. He realized that while it took a lifetime of rigorous training to produce a master samurai archer, a peasant conscript could be trained to fire an arquebus accurately in a matter of weeks. He established mass production facilities for gunpowder and lead, standardized gun barrels, and integrated large firearm divisions into his standing infantry regiments. The ultimate test of his technological doctrine came at the Battle of Nagashino in 1575. Nobunaga faced the feared Takeda clan, whose heavy cavalry was universally considered the most formidable military force in feudal Japan. The commander, Takeda Katsuyori, was convinced that his armored horsemen could easily shatter any infantry line before foot soldiers had time to reload their cumbersome weapons. Nobunaga constructed a defense that rewrote military doctrine forever. He erected long, wooden stockades along the banks of a river to block the momentum of a cavalry charge. Behind these barriers, he stationed 3,000 trained arquebusiers, organized strictly into 3 distinct rolling lines. When the Takeda cavalry launched their charge across the muddy plain, they ran directly into the world's first recorded system of volley fire. As the first line fired a coordinated barrage, they stepped back to reload while the second line stepped forward, followed immediately by the third. A continuous, deafening wall of lead tore through the charging horsemen. Wave after wave of elite Takeda samurai were obliterated long before they could even reach the wooden barricades. By afternoon, the legendary Takeda cavalry had ceased to exist. Nagashino marked the definitive end of traditional medieval samurai warfare and heralded the birth of modern, gun-centered military organization in East Asia. Yet the greatest obstacle to Nobunaga's dream of unification came not from rival warlords, but from the entrenched religious establishments of Japan. By the 16th century, major Buddhist monasteries were not peaceful retreats for meditation. They were wealthy, heavily fortified feudal states that commanded private armies of warrior monks, held vast agrarian estates, and controlled trade routes. They paid no taxes, recognized no secular authority, and frequently incited massive peasant uprisings. The most dangerous of these religious factions was the Iko-Iki, a militant movement of peasants, rogue samurai, and fanatic monks aligned with the Jodo Shinshu sect. They operated as an egalitarian holy army, dethroning local daimyo and creating autonomous territories that answered only to their religious leaders. Nobunaga engaged in an unyielding, total war against these monastic empires. In 1571, when the Grand Monastery of Enryakuji on Mount Hiei provided sanctuary to his enemies, Nobunaga committed an act that sent shockwaves of horror throughout the nation. Mount Hiei had been the sacred spiritual protector of Kyoto for nearly 1,000 years. Ignoring the frantic pleas of his own generals and priests, Nobunaga ordered his army to surround the mountain and set the ancient temple complex ablaze. His soldiers put thousands of monks, scholars, women, and children to the sword, burning priceless libraries and sacred art to ashes. For this act of unhesitating brutality, his enemies branded him Daroku Tenmou, the demon king of the sixth heaven, a title Nobunaga accepted with dark amusement. His campaign against the main Iko-Iki fortress of Ishiyama Honno-ji in modern-day Osaka was even more grueling, spanning a full decade from 1570 to 1580. The fortress was surrounded by deep water channels and supplied by powerful naval fleets from allied clans. To break the stalemate, Nobunaga commissioned the construction of the Atakpion, massive, iron-plated warships armed with heavy cannon that effectively blockaded the coastal supply lines. Deprived of food and ammunition, the holy fortress was finally forced to surrender in 1580, effectively dismantling the political and military independence of the Buddhist establishment forever. Beyond the battlefield, Nobunaga was a visionary administrator who laid the structural framework for modern Japanese society. He understood that permanent unification required a robust economy and centralized control over trade. Under his policy of Rikichi Rakuza, he abolished the restrictive merchant monopolies and craft guilds that had stifled commerce for centuries. He declared markets within his territories to be open and free to all traders, eliminated internal road tolls, and constructed standardized highways connecting key provinces. These measures triggered an explosion of economic activity, turning his territories into financial powerhouses capable of funding massive military campaigns. To curb future rebellions, he instituted the policy of Ikaku Ichijo, forcing defeated regional warlords to demolish their secondary fortresses, leaving only one official castle per province. He also broke away from the rigid caste system when selecting talent. While traditional lords promoted men based exclusively on lineage and high birth, Nobunaga rewarded pure merit and competence. The ultimate proof of this philosophy was Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a man who began his career as a penniless peasant sandal-bearer in Nobunaga's retinue and rose to become his most trusted senior general. Nobunaga also displayed a profound fascination with the outside world. When European Jesuit missionaries arrived in Japan, he welcomed them warmly into his court, not out of any desire to convert, but out of a deep curiosity for Western science, geography, astronomy, and military hardware. He recognized that the Catholic presence served as a useful political counterweight to the native Buddhist monasteries. He frequently wore European doublets, capes, and hats, collected global maps, and maintained a close friendship with the Jesuit missionary Louis Froys. His court also featured Yasuke, an African man brought to Japan by the Jesuits, whom Nobunaga took into his personal service as a salaried samurai, making him the first documented foreigner to achieve that status. In 1576, on the shores of Lake Biwa, Nobunaga began constructing Azuchi Castle, an architectural marvel designed to embody the new era he was building. Unlike older, purely functional fortresses built of wood and earth, Azuchi was an imposing palace rising 7 stories high atop a massive stone foundation. Its towering main keep was decorated with brilliant red lacquer, gold leaf, and elaborate screens painted by the legendary master Kano Eidoku. Azuchi was built not just to withstand sieges, but to project absolute, unchallengeable power, a physical statement that the chaos of the Sengoku era was coming to an end. By the spring of 1582, Nobunaga controlled more than half of Japan's provinces, including the entire economic and political core of the main island. His primary rivals, the Takeda, the Ase, the Asakura, and the Miyoshi, had all been shattered. The ultimate goal of national unification was no longer a distant dream. It was an inevitability within just a few years of campaign work. In June 1582, Nobunaga prepared to travel west to oversee a major campaign led by Toyotomi Hideyoshi against the powerful Mori clan. On his way to the front lines, Nobunaga stopped in Kyoto, taking up residence at the Honno-ji temple. Feeling entirely secure in the heart of his empire, he retained only a tiny personal bodyguard of fewer than 100 retainers. It was at this precise moment that treachery struck from within. One of his senior commanders, Akechi Mitsuhide, had been ordered to lead 13,000 troops to reinforce Hideyoshi. Instead of marching west, Mitsuhide halted his column outside Kyoto, turned his army around, and uttered the famous command, "The enemy is at Honno-ji." In the early hours of June 21, 1582, Mitsuhide's forces surrounded the temple. Outnumbered more than 100 to 1, Nobunaga's small guard fought valiantly, but they were quickly overwhelmed. Realizing that escape was impossible, a wounded Nobunaga retreated into the inner chambers of the temple. He ordered his attendants to set the building on fire so his enemies could not claim his head as a trophy, and performed seppuku as the flames consumed the structure. He was 48 years old. His body was never recovered from the ashes. The betrayal at Honno-ji plunged Japan into brief chaos, but the foundation Nobunaga built proved indestructible. Upon hearing of his master's death, Toyotomi Hideyoshi executed a legendary forced march, defeated Akechi Mitsuhide at the Battle of Yamazaki just 11 days later, and took up the mantle of unifier. Hideyoshi completed the conquest of the remaining islands, and after his death, Tokugawa Ieyasu established the Tokugawa shogunate, ushering in 2.5 centuries of continuous peace. A famous Japanese folk saying summarizes the distinct personalities of the three unifiers through their approach to a songbird that refuses to sing. Nobunaga says, "If the bird doesn't sing, kill it." Hideyoshi says, "If the bird doesn't sing, coax it." Ieyasu says, "If the bird doesn't sing, wait for it." Oda Nobunaga was the violent force of nature that Japan required to break a century of anarchy. He was a tyrant to his enemies, a genius to his followers, and a radical reformer who transformed warfare, economics, and politics. He cleared the battlefield of the old world, built the foundation of a unified state, and forever changed the destiny of Japan.